Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Since Bam Rodriguez knocked out Juan Francisco Estrada at the weekend, I've heard a lot of people talk about Bam versus NAOYA INOUE. And the question is this a fantasy matchup or is it a realistic proposition? Because as mouth-watering as it is, when you think about how good these guys are, at the moment they're separated by two weight divisions. And they're different ages, different generations, I suppose, in terms of, in fistic terms, they might well be. But let's go through a few things and see how realistic a proposition this is. So, first thing is the age difference. Bam is 24, INOUE is 31. 7 years, again, in fistic terms, is quite a difference. And of course, the question is INOUE going to age out, and is Bam going to be getting progressively better? Which I wouldn't bet against that. Not for a single penny. I think he probably will get better and better. But INOUE, where's that threshold? Where's that tipping point where he starts to go over the mountain? Now, I'm not saying he's got there yet, but I do think INOUE is probably as good as he's going to be, which is brilliant, of course. You could certainly make a case for him being the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Obviously, that's always subjective. But he is, even though he's still active, and I don't like judging people historically while they're still active, it looks like he's a shoo-in to be regarded as Japan's greatest fighter ever, with all due respect to fighting Harada. But he is 31, and another 2 years at the top, quite feasible. Yeah, that's quite possible. So the question becomes, if you take INOUE up to 33 and you take Bam up to 26, how good is Bam going to be? What's his prime? What's his ceiling? I think we've probably seen INOUE's ceiling. I could be wrong. Don't get me wrong. Don't misunderstand me. I could be absolutely wrong. This guy might just move up to featherweight and prove me different. Prove me wrong. But it's possible he's reached his ceiling. It's at 31, is he going to get any better? Doubtful, but possible. With Bam, you think 24, he's returned to super flyweight again. His body's filling out. He was struggling a bit to make 112, so he goes back up to 115 and knocks out, a Hall of Fame, a future Hall of Famer in Estrada in 7 rounds, dominates him, floors him, gets floored momentarily, but gets up and knocks him out with a vicious left hook to the liver. It would be fascinating to see them together, wouldn't it, in the ring, INOUE and Bam. But in 2 years' time, let's say INOUE is still pretty much at the peak of his powers. How much is Bam going to have progressed? Will he be able to take on an INOUE? It's possible. It's possible. But that's a debate. That's one of the aspects of this matchup that has to be considered. And the other thing is the weight. Second point to make is weight, because Bam is at 115, INOUE at 122, 7 pounds, which is half a stone. It can't be sort of poo-pooed at those weights. We're not talking heavyweights, we're talking small guys, and half a stone is a big chunk of weight if you weigh, 8 stone 3 and, putting on another half stone. And now it's perfectly feasible, we're getting back to the age thing, of course, that Bam will move up, and as his body gets older, he will fill out naturally into higher weights. I'm sure he will do that, just as INOUE's done. Because INOUE, once he'd unified bantamweight, he went up to super bantam, and he's sticking there for a while, which I think is a really sensible professional thing to do, to let your body fill out at 122. You picked up all the belts, defend them a couple of times, make a lot of money, beat a few good guys, make sure you've actually left no doubt whatsoever that you are, in the second successive weight division, the man, not a man or one of the men, but the man. I think it's great what he's doing. But it is possible, even if he stays at super bantamweight for another year, that Bam might not have filled out into a 122 fighter at the very least. I mean, he'd have to jump up to. I mean, he'd probably have to jump up to bantamweight now. Interestingly, all 4 of those belts at bantamweight are held by Japanese fighters. So let's say, for example, he went to Japan, knocked out a couple of the Japanese fighters, one of whom is Inoue's brother, holding one of those belts. And then maybe after a couple of fights, he could move up in, say, a year, 18 months to super bantamweight. And Inoue, if Bam tore a strip through the Japanese champions at bantamweight, maybe Inoue would be tempted to say, I'm going to stick around at 122 for this guy. And it might take 18 months, 2 years, but maybe Bam can tempt him into staying at 122 for long enough for them to eventually meet in 18 months, 2 years. I mean, it's possible. Is he going to do that? I don't think so. I think he'll probably go for unifications at 115. But what we don't want is, I mean, well, it's possible we could have a catchweight if in 2 years, maybe if Inoue's still at 122, or even if he moves up to 126 to featherweight, and let's say Bam is at bantamweight, you could have a catchweight sort of situation. Salvador Sanchez, Wilfredo Gomez, that type of thing. Well, there was one division separating him, or a Zarate Gomez sort of thing. That sort of, catchweight, but the smaller guys, catchweight fight, but probably still not as small as these guys, and probably not as much of a weight difference in terms of where they're at in their respective bodies. Because again, I'm getting back to the age thing. 7 years is a big gap, especially for the lower weights. 31, 33, 34, that's pushing it at that weight, even by today's standards. 24 is great, 26 is brilliant. You're probably in your prime if you're a flyweight bantamweight. But at the same time, it's possible. It's possible that they could do a catchweight at some point. What we don't want is, like I said at the start of the video, what we don't want is for Inoue to be aged out, and for Bam to be in his absolute prime and Inoue to be on the downside of his career. And I guess, you might get some action, but fights have sell-by dates. And we saw that with Pacquiao and Mayweather, which was a bore fest. And by the time it came around, I wasn't really that interested in it. On the domestic scene, Brook versus Khan was way past its sell-by date. Did it really deliver? Bit of an event, wasn't it? But no. You want to see fighters face when they're at their peaks. And these two guys, their peaks, it's almost certainly going to be at a different point. Now, if I was Inoue, I would want to be getting Bam right now, as good as he is, while I know what I can do, while I know that I can knock out other leading 122-pounders. I want this little guy to move up quickly, not to give his body a chance to settle into any particular higher weight. I want to get him now. But I don't think Bam or his handlers will fall for that. I don't think so. So if Inoue was to say, I mean, could Inoue make bantamweight again? Maybe at a push, maybe, So I suppose they could meet at bantamweight, but now, I say now, within the next, year, maybe. I think Inoue really is settled into that division, into that 122-pound division. I don't think he would want to come down anymore. I think his body's adjusted. So to conclude, how likely is this fight to happen? I think it's likely to happen eventually, but I don't think it's likely to happen when it should happen, if you know what I mean. When we see a genuine meeting of gigantic fighters, certainly not physically gigantic, but in terms of status, and in terms of gravitas, and in terms of historical relevancy, I don't think we're going to see them collide at that point. I think what will happen is, if it does happen, it will be a situation where Inoue is visibly past his best, looks like he's on the wane. He might be a featherweight. By this point, Bam might be, say, 28 years old, which would make Inoue 35. And then what we end up with is a guy who's in his absolute prime fighting a guy who's past his prime. And a lot of the luster comes off it. Like I was saying, if that's the case, I don't think we're going to, as great as appealing as the idea of this fight is, I don't think we're going to see it when we should see it. And when should we see it? Within the next 18 months, 2 years tops. I could be wrong. Oh, well, of course I could be wrong. We could all be wrong. But I think what we'll see is Inoue going up to featherweight eventually, maybe within a year. And that will probably be his ceiling in terms of weight. He could go high, he could go to super feather, he could probably beat a lot of super feathers, but he is 31, so I think, and he does seem to be very sensible about this weight thing. Like I said earlier, he likes to sort of, settle into the division, let his body adapt, because people who've never had a boxing match in their life, a lot of them just don't realise how important this weight making thing is, especially if you're a smaller guy and you have to boil yourself down. 3 pounds can be absolute agony. It can be agony if you're a middleweight, never mind if you're a bantamweight or a super flyweight. It can really drain you, and you can wreck your body going up too high and then coming down. I always think of Roy Jones coming back down to light heavy after he'd beaten John Ruiz at heavyweight. I think he weighed 198.5 for that fight. 198.5, and then he went back down to 175 in a matter of, I can't remember how, was it 6 months, maybe 8 months? Wrecked his body, absolutely wrecked his body. So you've got to be careful about weight. Anyway, what do you think? Do you think this fight will ever happen? If so, when? If they were to fight now, right now, regardless of weight, I would definitely pick Inoue to win. But that's not a gimme. Bam showed so much against Estrada. But I think because Inoue has settled into 122, I think if they fought right now at a catch weight, he'd win. But do you think this fight is likely to happen within the next 18 months, 2 years? Leave your comments below about how you think they would match up, when you think they should fight. And yeah, just let me know what you think. I'll read your comments as usual. And yeah, it's great. Thank you very much for all your time watching these videos. If you liked it, please hit like and also hit subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have, hit subscribe. Thank you very much. Spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll get you later. Bye for now.